DC trip for June 2022. So who's going to take the reins on that one?
I
Corey
could
or
I could just start us off and then turn it over. Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank you for the introduction, Meredith. And as we heard, and I hope you had a chance to take a look at the paperwork. Mrs. Bolchin has put together a proposal for a Washington, D.C. trip for June of 2022. Put together why, what, and how, and many more details. So thank you for putting that together, Mrs. Bolchin. And we've asked Corey and Ms. Bolchin to join us today and give a high-level overview of the why, what, and how, and then answer any questions that the team may have. We'd be looking for support for this proposal and then ultimately take it to the full board for their consideration. So, Mr. Bolchin and Mr. Erlinson, turn it over to you. Thank you.
I can just start by saying I'm fully supportive of the trip, but Sonia does all the hard work, and she's really done an amazing job with this over the years, so I'm going to let her share the details.
Hi, I'm Sonia. I was, I think at the board, last year proposing the trip, as I have for about 9 years in a row now. We think that the Washington, D.C. trip is a wonderful opportunity for our students, not just for the study of history, and experiencing some of the things that we study in our early American history course in 8th grade, and that they continue in their American history course in 9th grade. But we also really try to make it, a cultural trip as well. We take the kids to the Kennedy Center to see a show. We get them into as many Smithsonian museums as possible. We take them to some neat restaurants. And for a lot of the students, it's their first time traveling out of Manitowoc. So they get to experience, the bus ride through the mountains and all kinds of things. We prepare them through units of study before we leave. So they're well aware and well versed about the places that we're going to travel and visit. We talk to them about the seriousness of a lot of the places that we visit, like the Holocaust Museum and all of the war memorials. And my students tell me that it's one of the things that they remember most about their time at Wilson. And I just think it's a great trip, and I hope that you can approve it.
Thank you, Sonia. And I know one question that always comes up, because we want to make sure that we're being equitable, is what kind of fundraising opportunities are there for those that can't afford to pay the fees outright? Has that stuff been planned yet? I know you're like in this groove, right? Like you said, you've been doing this for like 9 years, so I'm sure it's like a fine-tuned, tuned system. But if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Meredith, the first year that we I took over the trip from Chris Callan, who still also works in the district, we, meaning the teachers, planned some fundraising, and we sold candy bars through Saruji's. And it was a lot of work for me and for Mr. Dumpke. And we lost some of our own money doing that because we would have to front the money. And after that experience, and I've always told parents this at the meetings, is that any parent group can form a fundraising committee, and we'd be willing to oversee that or help with that in the school. But I do not plan any fundraising for the students. Other than, what we give them through the World Strides company, which is the idea of sort of the gift of education. And that's always been the best fundraiser for kids anyway, where they talk to their friends and family who they might be going door to door selling things with, but talking to them about, I'm planning this trip. It's a year away. Here's a link, or here's a letter where instead of getting me a video game for Christmas, perhaps you could put $65 toward my trip. And I know I'm an aunt, and I have supported my nieces and nephews on their endeavors, on their trips through their schools when they tell me that they want that. And I give them much more money for Christmas for that than I do for,
Yeah, right.
whatever stupid thing they want.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at on fundraising.
Mrs. Bolton.
Sonia, oh, sorry.
Sure.
Sonia,
I'm just gonna ask.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Jason.
No,
Go ahead. Oh, I must apologize. I'm fairly new to the board, and I guess I'm still not too swift with the tech. I didn't see the proposal, but I would, without seeing it, I would, as a result of my own experience, I'd heartily be in the affirmative on this one. I worked at UW, the UW Center, and we first of all got the idea of taking kids to Chicago for a weekend. And in some ways it was life changing. And then the art teacher and I did a team course, and then took kids to Italy for spring break. And honestly, I can't think of anything that inspired them more. I mean, Italy, of course, would inspire a lot of people. A lot of wonderful and weird things, but just getting out. I mean, like you said, most of the kids in my courses hadn't been to Milwaukee. They hadn't been out. So a lot of them hadn't been out of Manitowoc County ever. And they came back with a curiosity and a desire to learn that was much more powerful than anything I could inspire in them. So I think it's a great idea, and if I could be of help by donating anything, I'd be happy to do that.
Thanks, Mr. Trask.
Jason, did you have something?
I was just gonna say, I thought I read Mrs. Bolton around scholarship availability for students as well. Is that true?
Again, that all goes through the World Strides company, which is who we've traveled with, and they do work. They handle all of the money with the parents. I don't do any of that. So there's an account manager there, and depending on, like, when we in the past, when we've had kids sign up, like, I've been able to give $500 worth of scholarships however I want to. They kind of leave it in my hand. And we did a drawing one year where each any student that was at the meeting and signed up, we gave them $50. And World Strides too does have need-based scholarships, but that's all that would be between the parents and the company. I don't have access to any of that, like account information or what makes a need-based scholarship through World Strides.
Mark, is there any availability to have some kind of account formed at the district if there were folks who would want to donate who may not know a kid directly, but believes in the mission of a trip such as this, that donations could be received? I would not want any kid left behind due to not having family support or having avenues to be able to earn that money.
Yeah, I would tell you there's probably two ways to do it. One, assuming it's spent in the same year, we would give it to Wilson's activity account, and then they would just hold a place in the activity account because it would be spent in the same year. If it wouldn't be spent in the same year, we would use the foundation, and the foundation does allow placeholders for very specific targets. Generally, if it's under $100, we try to funnel that back into the accounts. And I could talk to Angela about the specifics, but we receive would be able to receive donations and then fund it to Wilson's activity account, which then could get funneled through to World Strides as appropriate.
Yeah, I think, I think that may be a good idea to potentially pursue. And there's a lot of stimulus money coming out, and not everybody needs all that stimulus money. That's a great use for it, right? But I think that would be a wonderful avenue to, if folks were looking to donate something, potentially do that. Does anybody else have any other questions beyond what was in the meeting packet?
Yes, I do. Could someone just clarify, so this is exclusive to Wilson only? Is that correct? And, is Washington planning some type of a trip like this? Could someone just explain that?
Yes, I can talk through that. We've had that conversation with Corey and Lance and Mrs. Bolcher about the availability at Washington and Wilson. And right now, Mr. Masters has asked if there's any interest for chaperoning at Washington. And right now, there is no interest or availability to chaperone the trip. And through Mrs. Bolton's experiences, she's informing us that once we get beyond 2 buses, it's very difficult to navigate. So right now, we're looking at Wilson exclusively, but having continued conversations about how do we expand that to Washington, up to and including having some more parents join the chaperone roster. So that's where we're.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions?
I do have one, guys. So this is completely self-funded for each family, correct? Like, as far as costs, the only cost we have as a district is for our chaperones, right?
Yes.
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 Something, sorry. And so that was around, sorry, and I've completely switched my technology, so I'm not used to using the other thing. And I can't read it. It's very fine. It's around $5,000. Now that's total or per chaperone?
Oh, can it be per chaperone? Because I
Okay,
would
that's
like
my
you to
answer.
vote on that right now.
Thank you for the answer. I thought that's what it was, but I just wanted to have it clarified just to make sure. So, okay.
Any other questions? Then I would entertain a motion to go ahead and bring this to the greater board.
Yeah, I would make a motion to take it to the full board.
And I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. We'll go ahead and take that to the full board meeting. I would imagine, Jason, at our very next meeting, I think that's a noon one, right? Yeah.
Yes, we'll work with Lori Braun to make every effort to get it on the agenda for the next full board.
That
Sonia,
sounds great.
Sonia, could you send me a copy? I don't know if I know how to use board books yet or whatever, I mean, I don't know, maybe Lori can send me one just on email.
Okay, or Carrie, I'd be happy to do that tomorrow when I get to work.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in this. Sounds like a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. Yeah. Okay,
Awesome.
thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Sonia and Corey. I appreciate you all stopping in. Enjoy your evening.
Bye, guys.
All right, next on our agenda, we have Lori Williams present to walk through, much like we did with our literacy updates, giving us a math update for the district. And I believe there was a PowerPoint and board book. I'm toggling between taking notes and looking at my board packet. And so, Lori, I'll turn it, unless Jason, you wanted to say anything else, or Pam, before Lori hits it.
Yeah, I would just like to introduce Lori once again, but I think before we get to Lori, I'd just like to say that we have tentatively scheduled topics throughout the year for the curriculum committee. And this is our second K-12 math update. And we brainstormed different ways to bring updates to the team. And this update is like no other. And it's really centered around getting feedback from stakeholders at every building around what they're excited about math. And if they could change one thing about math, what would they change? And so it's interesting to read. I hope you had a chance to read some of that or listen to some of the videos. It's exciting to think about the future of math. And it's extra exciting knowing that we're coming out of a year like no other, and people are still excited about mathematics. So Lori Williams is the math guru for the district. She rocks mathematics, and she's rocked this update. So thank you, Lori, and take her away, please.
Thanks, Jason. And thanks for all of you on the curriculum committee to just give me a chance to share. I like to do my happy dance because I was really excited when after Jason and I decided that we were going to collect feedback this way. I wasn't sure exactly what was going to come in this pandemic year, but we needed to know, right? So I'm hoping that you all had a chance to read and watch some videos. And I will be more than happy to answer any questions about specific wording that's like very math. I tried to keep some of that out of there, or about CPM, or about bridges and the programs themselves. When I put together the report, I gathered information from representatives at all of the buildings, and I tried to get a diversity of grade levels as well. I think what it ended up to be is a great celebration of all the hard work and dedication of our professionals, our MPSD professionals, classroom teachers, math coaches, building administrators, the student learning office. I think that those celebrations came about because we did a good job supporting the professionals in very systemic ways. And some of those systemic supports included time for the teachers in the elementary classrooms. They each had 4 huge boxes of Bridges stuff to unpack, and we brought in some snacks and let them into their classrooms early. And even though we didn't know all of the virtualness and everything, they got in. We scheduled days, we scheduled coaches in there to help them out. We brought in professionals to train them on that Bridges program last March, and in August. The math coaches have been providing month-by-month support at a district level. So, for example, Heather Gary works with all of the K teachers, the kindergarten teachers from across the district. So she's our kindergarten first grade expert. Angela Nelson is second grade and third grade. And Jody Sommer has taken on fourth and fifth grade to be able to provide that unit by unit, month by month support. And then we have 4 buildings out of the 6 elementaries that have those coaches in there. And then I did some coaching at Riverview and Jackson this year and working with the PLCs in those 2 buildings. And then at the CPM level, we have always, since we adopted it, encouraged and paid professionals, if they were changing courses or they were new to the district, to go through the CPM training on that specific course and how to teach it well and what the content is. We continue to do that every year when teachers change levels or we have new people in the math department. And then we also had specific coaching for our secondary teachers. I introduced that a little bit last fall when I gave an update that we were talking about complex instruction and equity in access to all the mathematical topics, and helping to build students' confidence in their own mathematics skills and their agency to believe that math is important. We have plans in place to support math the same way next year. So I'm excited about that as well. And I just wanted to share real quickly one piece of evidence that has come across my desk in the last week, that not only do we have excitement, but we have greater student achievement, is the math coach at Jefferson does these huge data walls. And when she started measuring students' knowledge and skills against standards in the beginning of the year, those walls were yellow and red, which meant that the students did not have those skills yet. And she sent me a picture. She texted it to me just the other day, and they're now green and a little bit of yellow, but the orange and red is almost gone. So like, they're very excited about the fact that the kids are showing very specific growth against their grade level standards. So that was very exciting. Can I answer any questions from what you read, what you watched?
I want to commend our teachers for launching a brand new curriculum in the elementary schools during a pandemic.
Yep.
Where we've been in school out of not, in-person delivery, virtual delivery back and forth. And to see these comments and the excitement that still surrounds it is pretty awesome. So I know a lot of that is the leadership that is on this call right now, but it's a lot to do with those classroom teachers really digging in and loving it and making it work. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because that's pretty huge.
Thank you. They did. They worked very, very hard.
Does anybody have any questions for Lori?
I had a whole group of them actually. What's new? So this was not a survey then, Lori. You just reached out to specific individuals?
Yes.
Okay. So, because, when I saw it as an overview of the K through 12, I was actually looking for at least some negative comments. So I'm curious why there aren't any. That's kind of atypical, right? So have you received any?
I haven't. And I tried to reach out, not just to people who've been on math committees, not just to leadership, random teachers at Lincoln. I was expecting negative as well, and I would have put them in there, right? Like that would have been part of, I did have a couple of people who just wrote back and said, I don't have time to respond. And I had to live with that. It was, just about the time that we were doing the transition to full face-to-face learning. So, but yeah, I was really surprised too, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm actually concerned about that because I think that's again, it's not very typical, right? There should be something out there that someone's not happy with. So I'm wondering.
And I think that would come back on some other feedback surveys and perhaps not these avenues.
Yeah, maybe. So I do know that people, and what I was looking for in a K through 12 update is I'm still very concerned about where we're headed with our Math Excel program. So can you update us on what's happening with that? What's happening with identifying our 7th graders this year for next year? What's happened to our current 8th graders who were identified last year? And what are our plans for our accelerated math program moving forward?
Absolutely. We did provide that update in our first K-12 math update, so we want to do something different this time. I appreciate the question. So we do have compacted 7th grade and 8th grade math this year. I would be remiss to even guess at the number of students, but we have students in both of those levels. We started working with those professionals, the teachers that would be working with those students in the summer, knowing that we were going to navigate a year like no other, and thinking through and planning what those compacted sections would look like. So we worked with them monthly, I think, for the first several months of the school year to ensure that the courses were up and running. And Lori and I have, I think, time scheduled with Corey and Lance next week to begin the process to say, all right, what are we going to do next year? as an initial conversation, and then we'll bring those 7th and 8th grade teachers into the conversation. We will offer 7th and 8th grade compacted next year, and we just have to work through, similarly to what we did this year, to identify the data sets. We don't have some of those traditional data sets, so we just want to make sure we're grabbing the right data to identify and offer those opportunities to the right students. But there is no plans to not offer those sections for next year.
Okay, and are they sections that are in and of themselves, or are they being combined with other math courses or levels?
For next year?
Are they, yeah, or now and next year? What's happening with math? Are they combined right now, or are they getting their own section of math, of compacted math?
Next year, we have yet to talk about that, so there is no plans for the schedule next year. Right now, as we return to face-to-face, each building has dedicated, they have their students that are compacted and not compacted together in their math section together. And then each group has an additional time, either 25 to 30 minutes of additional time dedicated to more math work. So I guess the answer is both right now.
So
Okay.
it's kind of scaffolded within the same classroom for the different levels of students? Is that what you're saying, Jason? Okay.
Yeah, scaffolded in that section, and then additional time as well, just for the compacted students. And that was, again, the schedule. That model was created with input from the teachers.
So when is the additional time happening? If it's not a section, when is that taking place at 25 minutes?
At Wilson, it's being run through. They created a win time.
Mm-hmm.
There's an additional 30 to 25 minutes, depending on the grade level. And at Washington, the decision was made to run that through an elective period.
Okay. So if it's through WIND, those same teachers actually, are they overseeing a WIND period aside from or on top of having that compacted math group in their classroom?
Yeah, so for example, I think Peggy Fensel does 7th grade. So she has the 7th grade compacted, non-compacted in one section, and she is through the WIN period with those 7th graders compacted during that WIN section.
Okay, so just to make sure I know what I'm saying or thinking right, then when she has those kids in there, they're only compacted math kids, or other kids from her other sections coming into WIN also at that same time?
Just the compacted.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Any other questions about the math updates?
No, but I guess I would like to encourage Jason, Lori, whoever is listening, that when we get updates, that it's not strictly run through SLLs, that they gather information from those people in their departments, so we have a better overall picture and not continuously from the same 30 plus people.
Right, and it sounds like that's exactly what happened with this update, that it was a wide swath of teachers.
Yep. The names of those individuals do not represent just SLLs. I think Lori reached out to a number of folks at every building. Some folks, as she said can't do it right now. Others gave input via video. Others gave the written word, but they're not all SLLs for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Lori. I appreciate you being here tonight and the work that you put into that report. And again, please communicate how, the teachers are doing a great job really with that curriculum change and all that they're doing. Kids are learning, and that's important. So thank you.
Thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Most encouraged by what Jefferson did in her data tracking. That's really encouraging. I hope that other schools and teachers do the same thing. To have that visual for the students, I think, is also a good key for them.
All right. The last thing on our agenda is to discuss some equity updates. And I think, Pam, is that you tonight?
I'm going to start us off. Yes.
Okay, go for it.
We wanted to just provide you with a quick update on where we're at with some of the equity things. We know that earlier in the year, we had the folks from DeRoot come and talk with you in regards to some of the work that we've been doing with them this year. So just wanted to kind of remind you of them and talk a little bit about what are some of the things that we've been focusing on with them. And then Jason will talk a little bit more about some other things that we have going on. But with the DeRoot group, we started with them in August with about 35 administrators and leaders in the district on the staff development days. We come together with the DeRoot folks to get some training towards equity. And in August, our focus was really on developing some inquiry questions that would guide our work throughout the year. So identify 2 specific questions to take a look at. And that was the work in August. When we came back together in October, we spent some time really digging into some strategies for how do we address deficit language that occurs in our conversations with folks, and then also taking a look at how do we reframe conversations so that we really are making sure that we're using race-specific talk. And it was a challenge for us to really grow. Many of us are white as a part of that group, and so really challenging us to grow in our use of race-specific talk within our conversations. So each time we meet, the team gives us a specific challenge to take back and work on, and then come back the next time and share out how did we implement some of those strategies, and you know, how did it go? What were we feeling? What were we thinking? So it gives a good opportunity for discussion. In January, dug a little bit more into some of the practices and policies that we have that are really driven around our white culture and really don't include necessarily or take on the lens of looking at our students with color and how they impact them. And so there was really a focus on taking a look at some of that and how do the things that we do impact our students of color, and how can we change some of the ways that we operate to make sure that we're being inclusive in their practices. And again, a lot of that focus has really been on getting us to think and look at things that we've been doing and try to reframe some of that. But it's also been building our capacity to feel comfortable or more comfortable or handle, I guess, the discomfort that can come with taking a look at race and talking about it. And so some of the work that we've also done in those groups has been just to think about how to, when we're feeling uncomfortable, how to work through that, some kind of mindfulness kinds of strategies and things, support strategies for one another to really work through some of that discomfort. And that, I think, is an important key piece of just staying well throughout this process. And that's something that the DeRoot folks have emphasized throughout. One of the things that they've also guided us to do is set up a championing process. So everyone on the team is a champion to another person and has a champion. And so we meet monthly with each of our champion groups, and we sit down, we talk about the goals that we have set for ourselves to grow in 4 different areas, looking at wellness, relations, learning, and then I'm going to forget the other one. Can't remember the other one. But just taking a look at how are we building our own skill set in our own individualized way. So some of it is exploration, some of it's based upon just things that we want to accomplish as we start to move forward in our own exploration of equity. And so that process is continuing throughout. Tomorrow, we actually have our final opportunity for the year to spend some time with DeRoot, continuing to dig into the next step. They've given us a challenge to bring forward into our conversations tomorrow, and so that'll be a key part of that. And then they'll also just take our learning forward one more step. So that is really what the year has been for DeRoot. And as we get through tomorrow, then our SLO team will meet with the DeRoot folks to talk about what's next in terms of planning and looking at our work with that group for next year. So any questions about the DeRoot piece?
Yeah, Pam, what are some of the white-based policies that we have and that were identified? Like,
Yeah.
like you're giving us a big overview, but like,
Mhm.
can we be more specific and say what's, you know, or like you're trying to do a championing process, like what are the goals? Like, I guess I want more specific information. I'm looking at more details.
Then when I talk about what the policies and things, we haven't identified specific policies. What we're doing, Kathy, is learning about how to go about that process. We haven't dug into that yet. So it's about having conversations and how do you talk about the things that are going on from the lens of what kinds of things do we do because it's based upon our white culture that may actually exclude students and families of color. And so we're just having conversations about how do we think through that. So when we look at something we do, for example, it could be like a policy on dress code, you know, and taking a look at that through that lens. And so we haven't really dug into our specific policies, but have more gotten into how do we learn how to do that so that when we take that next step and start to dig into some of those things, we have a lens by which to do it. So,
Okay.
So I was, if Kathy, you still have the floor.
Oh, no, go ahead, Karen.
Well, I was kind of interested. I mean, some of the language is still is somewhat foreign to me, but I don't know what DROOT is. I have no idea what race specific talk is, and I really like Kathy. I wanted some examples about what white people do, but even beyond that, I'm interested in what is the goal of this exercise. I mean, who is what you know, who's the doer here? I mean, you said administrators and leaders have gathered together. Is this just a sort of a top down, like we need to shape up our language and our behavior in order to make people from marginalized groups feel more comfortable? I mean, is that kind of the thing?
the goal is to build our equity practices so that we are more inclusive in how we interact and engage with others. And what this group has done, Carrie, is this DROOT group is a group that we connected with because they do consulting on these equity topics. And we met with them and talked about where we want to go and felt as though they could help us learn in year one how to look at some of the things that we do. So when we talk about things like race-specific language, it really is looking and focusing on how are we naming, you know, some of the things that we're talking about, and not in a generalized way, but a very specific way, so that we can talk about students of color, and we can talk specifically about Black students, or our Asian students, or our Hispanic students, instead of kind of generalized terms. And so it's more right now of a learning process, so that as leaders, we can help kind of take a look at that planning for next steps, to bring and build the capacity of our staff, bring this to them and build the capacity of our staff. And one of the things that we have to address is the fact that we do have some populations within our school that have some pretty significant gaps in terms of their educational progress. And then we also have some gaps within our how we respond to student behaviors. Some of our populations have a more disproportionate response, you know, in terms of removal from school, in terms of placement in specialized programming. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing that. And this is a part of that process, but it's just that kind of that big picture right now of learning for us as an administrative team.
Okay, so the sort of the goal is to kind of, you know, bring the culture that exists within the school system sort of into line with the society that we have, even though, I mean, this is a very wide area. So yeah,
absolutely. And it's challenging because to do it right, you have to have some open conversations and really work to make sure that we're building that openness and that inclusiveness to be able to talk about the things that are difficult, the challenges, and hear other folks, you know, from our families of color, from different students of color, talk to us about what are the things that we're doing that maybe don't align with bringing them in and being inclusive. And so just trying to learn how to respond to some of those things, how to lead some of that is what we're engaging in right now.
But I think just the process is probably a very positive message to people that sometimes feel, misunderstood or left out. Yeah.
Is this part of our state mandated, what was that called before, the disproportionate IEPs, or was it EBDs? But you know how we had to respond to the disproportionate number we had in the program? Is DeRoot part of what we're doing for that?
Yes and no, Kathy, because it's a part of it, but we actually explored DeRoot prior to that identification. But right now, Lynette, who is the district, the general ed behavior responsive or culturally responsive behavior specialist person, she is a part of this team. And so she's engaging with us in that process so she can use her learnings from this experience to help kind of guide that process in the buildings with some of the folks that are working on her team. So yes, it's in conjunction with it. It just happened that we reached out to DeRoot prior to some of those things being put in place.
Well, that was a nice coincidence then.
Sometimes things are just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey,
Go
if
ahead, Pam.
you have any questions about DeRoot, I just wanted to let Jason take us through to some of the other things that are focusing on in the equity lens. Oh, Jason, you're muted.
Is that a quarter or 50 cents? As Pam mentioned, part of the champion process is, for example, Mr. Durkis is my champion, and he checks in on my goals that I've written. And early in the year, we found that we had a common goal of building community partners around equity. So we actually reached out to a number of organizations we didn't have a goal in mind other than to say, hey, we're talking about equity, and what would it look like for us to collaborate around equity? So we have had some initial conversations with leaders from Manitowoc Public Library. They're going through a similar journey this year, and again, we don't know where it will go, but they're excited to partner with us. And it may, we've brainstormed ideas of bringing some staff members together to share their journey. We also connected with a multicultural group at LTC, and Lynette is already a member of that group, and we're going to ask one of our counselors to join that group moving forward. So that's just another partnership. And then we're really excited. One of the groups that we reached out to was UW Green Bay, Manitowoc. And they have an inclusivity champion at UW Green Bay. And we've had several conversations with our UW Green Bay, Manitowoc CEO and the inclusivity champion. They have, I think, 6 strategic goals around equity that he's kind of shared with us. And willing to support our work around equity. We don't know where that's going to go either, right? But listening, learning together, and the extension and offer of supporting our work is pretty exciting. So we'll continue to have these conversations with community partners around county and beyond. And the other piece I wanted to mention again was, you mentioned around the disproportionality. We know that we just need to be focused in this work, right? We don't want to have a lot of things going on that aren't connected. So Lynette, for example, has been a part of the conversations with our Green Bay partners. And we will work hard to just make sure that the focus is square on equity and not take this haphazard approach. So it'll be just a continued journey that I am excited about, and I think many other people are excited about.
Thank
Eric,
you.
if I could just add, I think that one of the things that is absolutely true about the work in DeRoot and our work this year is that for the first time, this district is purposeful on improving equity, inclusion for all. And in past, we talked a little bit about it. When I say purposeful, I'm having conversations with people about making sure that we have a diverse reading series or reading books for elementary school kids that have Black and brown kids instead of Jack and Jill, right? Now that might not be something that's going to change our practice in the big picture, but we're saying we recognize this and we need to improve that. We also understand that the academic social emotional behaviors are not the same for kids who are Caucasian, for kids who are not. And that is not acceptable. And we have to improve that. The one-on-one conversations that we are having with our coaches and our champions, I guess, not coaches, our champions, are, in my experience, some of the most difficult and powerful conversations that we have had in a long time. Because it is you are responsible for doing something about the inequities that you have written down. And we have inequities. When we talk about graduation rate, when we talk about participation in co-curriculars, when we talk about the number of kids who are asked to leave school, when we talk about our expectations for headgear, when we talk about we have things that we need to take care of, and we are now creating some actionable items by these written goals and reviewing those. I look forward to expanding some opportunities for this group for more people so that they can also have these deep conversations, to look at it from the lens of equity as opposed from the lens of loud speaking folks, right? So again, what we're seeing in our community is, right, 62% of our population in school is Caucasian, and 38% is not. And that number is going to grow from not to somewhere down the road in 12 years, we will likely be 50-50. And that doesn't change how we teach. It just means that we have to understand that we have to do a better job of recognizing what we're doing, whether it's with our hiring practices, whether it's doing with our social promotions, and whether it's doing with our own internal need to support all learners. So I just feel like this DeRoot has really forced us to make some changes in our own behaviors. And again, for 35 folks, and championing the cause. But I do see this starting to move into action in other areas that I think will reap benefits for our students and our community to come.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions about equity updates? Okay, that is the end of our agenda. And so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'm going to ask for
I'll move. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Carrie.
Okay, I'll move. We adjourn.
And I'll second that. Kathy, did you have a question before we called it to vote?
I did actually. And it's not really so much for me, but for Carrie. I'm just thinking, Carrie, are you aware of what an SLL is? Like, we use a lot of acronyms, and when someone
right.
right.
It's like being in the Peace Corps, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, when someone new comes on board, we don't have, like, we feel silly for asking the question, right? And just assume someone knows the answer. So if Pam or Jason, somebody could quickly explain the difference between like an SLL and basically what that is, or what it used to be called, that would help too.
Sure, I can take a stab at that. I believe 4 years ago, we had a group that were referred to as department chairs. Those department chair folks were teacher leaders that supported teaching and learning, and it was predominantly at the high school level. So we talk about 1,000 conversations. Through 1,000 conversations, we look to expand the teacher leader group. And we call them the SLLs. They're the student learning liaisons. So we have about 33, 35 student learning liaisons that are teacher leaders, and they represent every content area and every grade band. So for example, we have a teacher leader that champions mathematics at the elementary group or elementary level. We have another SLL that champions math at the middle level, and then another teacher leader. It's actually two because they split the co-SLL at the high school level. And for our 4 core, we have those teacher leaders identified at elementary, middle, and high school. Some of the content areas are not elementary applicable, so some areas are middle and high school, some are just high school. So those teacher leaders, we really focus on 2 things. We want them to be kind of a conduit of communication, so we give them some updates from the district level every month, and they take a look at that, and then they share it with teammates, and they bring information to us. We seek their feedback for many things. And the second thing is we've talked to them, and we've done PD, professional development, for the last 3 years with them. We want them to shepherd the professional learning community model. So we really want them to become experts. I think we're all growing in that area, but become experts around how do we collaborate at high levels, how do we focus on learning at high levels, and how do we use data to drive instructional practices at high levels. So the student learning office team meets with that teacher leader group once a month. We do some professional development and learning together. We also help support their leadership of in-service day collaboration. So many of those teacher leaders run groups in-service days in the mornings. So we support that work. And then we also hold an annual leadership conference in the summer. And that's a 2-day event. And we have been fortunate to be in a position to bring nationally recognized speakers, authors around that professional learning community model to our district. So we have sponsored Anthony Mohammed. We have sponsored Ken Williams. And last year we had Thomas Maney, and he's going to return in August. And these folks are, I would say, internationally known for their books around how to collaborate and how to improve student achievement. And Thomas Maney, of all 3, not to disparage any of them, but Thomas Maney was the most well-received of those 3. And we received so much positive feedback about his genuineness and his practical strategies of how to take what we read in a book and put those into practice the next day. So we're really excited to bring him back, and he's going to kind of expand on what we learned last summer around that collaboration. And he's going to start talking about how does assessment fit into that conversation. So we're always scaffolding to the next layer with that group.
And he was so impressed with the Manitowoc team that he's retired now, but he's coming to Manitowoc in August to support us.
Wow. Wow. That's cool.
Very good. Yeah, Carrie, if there's ever some of those acronyms or things that we're talking about that we need to slow down, or not slow down, but be able to fill in some gaps, just, it's okay to call a timeout and have us do that. So.
Okay, appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. I will call that vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you so
cool.
much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Mark, do you have a minute after Jason stops live streaming and folks leave? Or would I just